Okay. So, hello, slowly the people are arriving as always. And I hope, my friends, that you know that this will be an English tour. I mean, you can hear it, obviously, already. So, I see the names that I know so well. Hello, Martin. Hello, Manuela. Hello, all my friends. I'm doing actually the tour in English because some of my American friends asked me to do an English tour, finally. So from time to time, as you know, I'm doing an English tour. So for example, the Christmas tour and so on. And this time I thought so many people want to see the Jewish Vienna tour in English. Why don't I do that? But I only see Austrian names. It's so funny. I could also do it in German. But no, I'm stubborn and I'm going to do that in English today. All right? So I see that the audience is filling up very quickly. So this way we have a kind of English conversation hour together. That's also something nice. The sound is okay, I suppose. Hi to everyone. Hello Anna, hello Helga. Yeah, and I would say let's get started and let's have a look at Jewish Vienna. All right. Hi Ursula. Hallo ihr Lieben. All right. So let me turn this around. Okay. So this tour is actually supposed to be a short tour, a 45 minutes tour. Why? I always thought that it's pretty impossible to squeeze more than 800 years of Jewish history into 1 hour, and this time I really just want to give you a taste. It's supposed to be a teaser tour. I also do the Jewish tours as face-to-face tours here in Vienna, so you are invited, of course, to join me. Then it's usually a 2 hours tour, but this tour today is supposed to be just a teaser and actually to show you how the wealth of the Jewish culture here in Vienna, and also of course to tell you about the mostly very sad history of the Jewish communities here in Vienna. We are at the moment talking about 4 Jewish communities, and I would like to start with the first Jewish man that came to Vienna, and that was in the 1190s. So that's really long ago. And this name of the first gentleman who came to Vienna was Schlom. Schlom was a coin maker. He was the Münzmeister, the mint master of the Babenberger dukes in those days. And he was called to Vienna, and his main job was to make coins out of the ransom that was paid for the English king Richard the Lionheart. So there is a connection between the English king Richard the Lionheart and the first Jewish man here in Vienna. Actually, the ransom for Richard the Lionheart was silver, huge amounts of silver, and that silver was brought on big barges along the Danube River, and someone had to make coins out of that silver, and that was Mr. Schlom. He lived here in the area of Seitenstädtengasse together with his family, but he was killed a couple of years later by crusaders that came through the city, and that was the end of the first a Jewish family that officially lived in Vienna. That's also mentioned in documents where you can really read the name in historical documents. But still, later Jewish families came to Vienna, they settled down here, and they actually really settled down here in this area. We are here on Judenplatz, on the Jews Square, right in the heart of the city of Vienna. It's a very, very beautiful square, especially the little house there in the middle that looks very medieval, and it is the oldest house here on the square, the Jordan House. Other houses are younger, the house of the Wiener Gastwirte over there, for example, and this one here. So these are the typical 19th century houses. But as always in my tours, imagination is very important. Your fantasy is important, and you have to imagine this square here, not as an empty square, but filled with little houses, with cobblestone streets, with a synagogue here in the middle, with kosher butcheries, with a mikveh, a ritual bath, so filled with everything that was needed for a Jewish community. And this Jewish community lived here in Vienna until the year 1420, and then it was practically totally erased. It was the so-called Viennese Gesera in the year 1420-1421, when Duke Albrecht the Fifth came back from a war against the Hussiten. These were the followers of Jan Hus, a kind of pre-reformator in Bohemia. And the Catholic Habsburgs, they did not like the Hussiten. So there was a war against the Hussiten, and Albrecht had lost the war. He came back from the war, he had lost the war. He was very, very angry, and he needed someone to blame for the loss of the war. Who did he blame? The Jewish community that lived here in the Middle Ages. And it was a very cruel expulsion, or killing, you could also say. The poorer people were brought down to the Danube River. There was the infamous rudderless boat prepared for them, so they were more or less put on that rudderless boat and pushed out into the Danube River. It was a death sentence, more or less, but some of them survived, and they arrived Hungary. There they were taken on land, and they were protected by Emperor Sigismund there. Yeah, it is a sad story. This tour today is not a fun tour as we usually have. It's a sad tour, but you knew that. So the Emperor Sigmund took them on land and more or less protected them. And it was this Emperor Sigmund that gave the name to Sigmund Freud many hundreds of years later. So Sigmund Freud was named after Emperor Sigmund, who was a protector of the Jewish people in the Middle Ages. Other members of the community here were tortured, and then they were burned alive on a stake in Erdberg. It's very close to the Hundertwasserhaus. Yeah? So when you go nowadays to the Hundertwasserhaus, to the colorful house in the 3rd district, keep an eye on one of the more modern houses on the left side, on the same side as the Hundertwasserhaus, and there you will see a plaque, and that tells you the story that about 200 Jewish people were burned there in the year 1420. And the other ones, they gathered here in the middle of the square, in the big old medieval synagogue that had been built by stonemasons of St. Stephen's Cathedral. Can you imagine? So there was a cooperation in some times. And they killed themselves in the synagogue. And that was the end of the prosperous, lively first Jewish community here in Vienna. There is a museum here in the corner. It is the Museum of Medieval Jewish History, and when you go in there, which I absolutely recommend, then you will see models of the old Jewish area here. You will see how the synagogue looked like, a little bit like the beautiful old one in Prague, the Altneu Synagogue, and you will hear a lot about Jewry in the Middle Ages. So absolute recommendation, and of course also the other Jewish museum in Dorotheagasse. So now I want to talk a little bit about the monument. You saw it already. It is the Shoah Memorial, or the Holocaust Memorial. I rather prefer to call it the Shoah Memorial. It was built here around the year 2000, and it was an architect's competition that was won by an English architect, Rachel White-Read. Rachel White-Read works a lot with the shape of things. She likes to take things and turns them inside out. And in this case, this is a library turned inside out. It's also called the Nameless Library. And when we go closer, you will soon understand why. Even from the distance, it looks a little bit like a library. So when we go closer, you will see that these things here are books. Many books are here on this memorial. They are not 65,000 books, they are less books. 65,000 is a number that I mention because 65,000 Austrian Jewish people were killed in the Shoah. So this is just a symbolic number here on the Shoah memorial. Why did she choose the books? I was lucky enough to hear a lecture by Rachel Whiteread, and she said in this lecture that for her, every life of a human being is like an open book. And while the person is alive, the story of his or her life is written on the pages of the book. And so each page is being filled, and the book of life is getting lively and interesting and colorful. But when the person dies, the book is closed and put into a bookshelf. So every single book that you see on this memorial stands for a life that is over. In this case, much too early. The impressive thing, or the thing that catches your eye immediately, I suppose, is that the books are in the bookshelves the wrong way round. Usually you put the book into a bookshelf and want to see the title, you want to see the name of the book. But here the name is hidden on the back. And she wanted to show by hiding the name, by taking the name away, or by putting the books into the bookshelf the wrong way round, that the Nazis took the names away from the people. You know all that in Auschwitz the people had no name, and all the other concentration and death camps, the people had no names anymore officially. In Auschwitz the numbers were tattooed on their forearms. A name is something very, very personal. So when you take a name away, you take a part of the personality of the person away. It was not only the name, it was the hair, it was the clothing, it was the family, it was the past and the future. Everything was taken away. What is also an eye-catcher or interesting is that the books are actually hanging in the air. They are not in a bookshelf. There is no iron or wooden construction or anything. They are hanging in the air, as you can see here. And this is because she wanted to show that the weight of all these murdered people cannot be carried by a piece of furniture or by a bookshelf, but that it weighs heavily on a city that did not help them and a state that did not help them. That's the symbolic behind this memorial. It's very rich with its symbolic meanings. It happens very frequently that I come here with American guests, and they come on the square, and the square is so beautiful. Just look at the buildings here, and they say, wow, what a beautiful square, and what an ugly bunker in the middle. And then when I explain, or when I start explaining the meaning of the symbols, then they start to understand, and sometimes they also start crying, especially when they had family members that were killed in the Shoah. One last thing I would like to point out before we move on is the door. You can see that the door is made of concrete, and there are no door handles. That means you cannot come here and open the door and bring some fresh air and light and maybe flowers or whatever inside. It's impossible. The idea of Rachel Whiteread, the artist, was that there will be, it's dark and empty inside, that there will be a dark and empty spot in the middle of the city as long as the memorial is existing and as long as the memory is existing in the brains of the people. And I would like to walk once around the memorial, because on the foundation walls are the names of all the concentration camps where the people were killed. Of course, with Auschwitz, the most well-known, and Buchenwald. They should clean it. It's very hard to read that. And here in the middle, this is something I also want to show you, because you have to imagine the old medieval synagogue was destroyed in 1420. In a very cynical way, the locals used the stones and the bricks of the synagogue to build the Catholic faculty of the University of Vienna. And when you go into this museum in the corner, you can walk through a corridor underneath the square, and then you arrive in the ruins of the old synagogue. There are some bricks are still around, and you can imagine down there how big the synagogue used to be. And this circle here shows where the bima used to be, and where you can also see the bima downstairs. The bima is more or less the place from which the Torah is read. It's, I don't want to say anything wrong, but it's a little bit like the altar in the Catholic and Christian religion. The bima is something where the Torah, so the holy word, is read during the service. So, and the bima also has the corners. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagon, and that we are standing right on the bima now. Okay. So here again you can see all the names of the concentration camps, concentration and death camps. For my Austrian followers, you all know Mauthausen, I'm absolutely sure. It's usually also a school trip, a school excursion that you do in the last year of school. Mauthausen was the largest concentration camp of Austria. I remember clearly the day when we visited Mauthausen with school. It's long ago, but still I see myself standing there, and how it gave me the goosebumps. Mauthausen had so many satellite camps. In the smallest Austrian villages, there were satellite camps. And when you go to the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is very close by, I will show you where it is, there is a little museum about the life of Simon Wiesenthal, and there they also show the famous map that Simon Wiesenthal had his office, where with red dots all the concentration camps, the satellite camps, are marked on the map of Austria, and there are hundreds of them. It's incredible. Mauthausen is just the most well known. Don't want to use the word famous, it's more or less infamous, but there were lots and lots of others. But to tell you something happy as well, we have a lively Jewish community here in Vienna now. It's the 4th Jewish community. The first was the one that was expelled in the year 1420. Then we had 2 in between. And now we have the 4th. 2, 3, 4, yeah. Wait a second. 1, 2, 3, yeah. And each year in June there is a big yes, it's the 4th now. I had a Freudian problem. My unconscious did not really work at the moment. So it's the 4th community. So each year at the beginning of the summer, here on this pretty square is the Jewish Street Festival. And another recommendation, come here, you have to bring an ID, because there is, you will have to show your ID. You will have to show your ID. But then all over the square here are little stalls, and you can eat specific food from Israel, Yiddish food, matzah ball, for example, and all the Jewish communities are presenting themselves. This is how my younger son, Jacob, became for a couple of years part of the Jewish swimming team. Although we are a Catholic family, Jacob proudly swam for the Hakoah swimming team before he went studying abroad. But he was really very much into swimming in the Hakoah. I think this is very nice, and also shows how open they are in the meantime again, which is very good. So big recommendation, come to the Jewish Street Festival. It's a lot of music, a lot of dancing, a lot of fun, and a lot of good food. Before we move on, I would like to introduce you to this gentleman. This is Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, as you can see here. He has been here since the year 1935. It's a sculpture made by Henri Charroux in 1935. And he is here because he has a connection to the Jewish life. He lived in the 18th century. He was a big follower of the ideas of the Enlightenment, and also met Joseph II, Emperor Joseph II, at least once, maybe even twice. And he was a good friend of Moses Mendelssohn, the founder of the Jewish Enlightenment, who lived in Berlin. So they were friends. And Lessing wrote a very famous play for the stage, which some of you might know. It's called Nathan the Wise, Nathan the Weise. And Nathan the Wise had Moses Mendelssohn as his model. The Nazis did not like the idea that Lessing and also the other followers of Enlightenment said that all people are equal, should have the same rights. So in a very childish way, more or less they destroyed the Lessing monument, and then until 1945 there was no Lessing monument anymore. And in the 1980s it was put up here again. So in 1982, since that time, Lessing is here overlooking the Jewish square again. So maybe you want to read Nathan the Wise, or when they perform it in the Burgtheater, go have a look and you will hear about the ideas, the romantic ideas of the Enlightenment. Somehow they don't really work, but the ideas were very good and very romantic, and he writes about those in Nathan the Wise, Gotthold Ephraim Lessing. And now we are moving on. Have a look at this house here. You see that there is a relief in the middle of the facade. This relief shows Jesus being baptized in the river Jordan. The house was owned by a Catholic, and the name of the owner of the house was George Jordan. So it's more or less a double Jordan house. George Jordan shows the baptism of Christ in the river Jordan. It's a Zungenbrecher, as we say in German. Here under the relief is a plaque, and while we are moving on, I'm going to tell you what is written on the plaque and the reactions to the inscription, because I have to walk a little bit now. So, the plaque is written in Latin, but fortunately I know the translation. The plaque talks about the expulsion, the Gezerah, the disaster in the year 1420, when the Jewish community was completely erased, expelled and murdered. And it says, more or less in a nutshell, that the rage of fire went through the whole city and erased the sins of the Hebrew dogs. So they are talking about the Hebrew dogs. And there have been discussions going on for a long, long time if there should be a plaque that explains what is written up there. I told you at the beginning of the tour that I come here on the square so often, and that people really love the square. I mean, it is a beautiful square. And then they have a look at the house, and it's a nice medieval house, and everyone likes the house. And I think it would be appropriate, and I think I'm not alone with this, with these ideas, because I told you that discussions have been going on for a long time. It would be appropriate if there would be some explanation of what is written on the plaque under the relief of the baptism of Christ. So while we are walking here, I want to ask you, how are you doing? Are you fine? I don't see any comments today, but let me know. Let me see some hearts or thumbs up if you are feeling good, if you are enjoying the tour. Although it's such a sad topic, thank you. That's very, very important for me. I was very long, very reluctant to do the Jewish tour online. Thank you, you are my best. To do the Jewish tour online, because I think it's very tough to squeeze it all and also say everything in a proper language in such a short amount of time. It's a very tricky topic, But I hope that you are enjoying it, and that that you're somehow fascinated about what happened, and that you maybe also want to read a book about what happened, or come on my tours, or see the museums. It's really worth seeing that. By the way, we are here looking at something that is non-Jewish. It's the old Rathaus, the old city hall of Vienna. Very beautiful, with a double-headed eagle on it. It's a beautiful building. You see that it is an important building because of the flags. So now we are going over to our next stop. In front of us in the distance there is the Hohe Markt with the wedding fountain. But we want to go to a specific staircase, which I want to show you, because that staircase has a very interesting name. It's named after a very important person. So while we are walking, after the end of the first Jewish community in 1420, 1421, for about 100, a little bit more than 100 years, no Jewish people came back to Vienna. It was like burned soil in Vienna. All the houses were destroyed on Judenplatz. This is why it's now an empty square. The people came, the people of Vienna came, and they took the bricks. They thought, oh nice, empty houses. I can take the bricks to build my own house. And so that's what happened. And the second Jewish community, which slowly came into existence in the 16th century, did not settle down on Judenplatz anymore, but first here in this area on the left side, in the area of Judengasse. That's the reason why it's called Judengasse. They were tolerated there by the emperor, who allowed them to be there. But very soon the emperor changed, was a different emperor, and the next emperor said, okay, you can have your shops there in Judengasse, but we don't want you to live here within the city walls. We don't want that. Go on the other side of that river over there, and there shall be the place where you are allowed to live. So he sent them over one of the streams of the Danube River. Danube was then still a very dangerous river with a lot of tributaries, a lot of arms. And on an island between two different arms of the river, the Untere Wert, the new community was allowed to settle down. And that area was an actual ghetto. That means that around the houses was a wall with a gate, and in the evening the gate was closed, and it also stayed closed on Sundays, on Catholic holidays, because the Jews were supposed to stay in there in the ghetto. It was of course not the nicest place, because the Danube had high water very frequently, so there was always the danger of floodings and of illnesses after the floodings. The emperor, I suppose, knew exactly what he did when he sent them over there. The Jewish life in Vienna was always dependent on the emperor, or at the beginning on the goodwill of the dukes. If the duke said, okay, I need them, I accept them here, mostly because of the money. They were money lenders. They were not allowed to do anything else, so they were the money lenders. So I accept them because I need the money. Then it was all fine. When he decided that he did not want to have them here, then he usually expelled them. And I think I did not explain properly what happened in 1420. Albrecht V came back from the war against the Hussiten. He had lost the war, he was angry. And the Jewish people were like the black sheep. Yeah, he said, you are the ones who were traitors. You supported the Hussiten, and by the way, you are kidnapping Catholic babies, you are poisoning wells, and so on. Yeah, so these were the official reasons why he expelled them. The real reason why he expelled them in 1420 was that he had borrowed so much money for exactly that war from the Jews. And he didn't want to pay the money back. So the easiest way to get rid of your debts is to get rid of the moneylenders. This was the main reason for the expulsion of the Jews in 1420. So I told you that I want to show you a staircase. This is not a really overwhelming staircase. It's also a little bit hidden, but it has a very, very famous name. I can see that we are nearly 100 people. I'm very happy. I'm very happy about that. So it has a very famous name, and that is Theodor Herzl. It's a Theodor Herzl staircase. And the text tells us that Theodor Herzl, author and journalist, wrote in the year 1896 in Vienna the book Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, and was as such the founder of the idea of creating the state of Israel. He never saw the creation of the state of Israel. He died much too early. He died in 1904. He was only 44 years old when he had a heart attack in Edlach an der Rax in the south of Vienna. But we know that the state of Israel exists now, not without problems, but it exists. This was the dream. This was the dream of Theodor Herzl. So there is a group coming now. I'm going to move on. Theodor Herzl died in Edlach an der Rax. He was buried in Vienna on the cemetery of Döbling. And fun side fact, or fun fact, the grave is still existing. So you can go to the Döblinger cemetery, and in the very last corner, there we will find the grave of Theodor Herzl and his parents. Of course, Theodor Herzl is not buried here in Vienna anymore. He was taken out of his grave, and also his parents, and buried in Jerusalem on what is now called the Herzl Mountain. But when you go to the Döbling cemetery, you will find his grave, and someone always puts the stones on the grave. This is, instead of the flowers, like we do on the graves, the Jewish people put the stones on the graves. So, now we are here on the Sieder Friedmannplatz. The Sieder Friedmann was the last president of the Jewish community in the year 1938, was also killed in a concentration camp. So that's the square named after him. And before we go down to Seitenstättengasse, I want to show you one of the stumble stones here. I know I'm not supposed to call it a stumble stone, because the stumble stones, that's the name for them in Germany. Here we call them the stones of remembrance. Anyway, however you call them, it's good that they are here. I hope I can show this to you. I have to go down on my knees. I think this is also the purpose. The stumble stones you can find everywhere in the city, where Jewish people used to be, where a Jewish institution used to be, a Jewish coffee house, a theater, a variety, and so on. That's where you will find the steps of remembrance. And when you go over to the second district, there is a whole path of remembrance that takes you all the way through the second district. They always tell the names, or some of the names, of the people who lived in a specific building. When were they born? When were they deported, and where? And when did they die? So in this case, it's, for example, here Malvine Fried, who was born in 1872, deported in 1942 to Riga, and was killed in Riga. So go through the city with open eyes. You will find a lot of the stumble stones. Many of the stumble stones, I wanted to say, or the steps of remembrance, as we are supposed to call them. So we are now here in the so-called Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is, as my Austrian friends might know, the bar district of Vienna. So there is one bar after the other. This is exactly why we call it the Bermuda Triangle, because people say once you vanish in one of the bars, you will never be seen again. So this is a crazy area here. But it's awesome the area of the synagogue. I don't want to go too close to the synagogue. I want to walk a few steps down here. We are here in the beautiful Seitenstättengasse. And here in Seitenstättengasse is the oldest still existing synagogue of Vienna. But when you look down the street, you have no idea that there is a synagogue. It looks like an apartment house, and it was an apartment house originally. But it's the largest still existing synagogue, the oldest still existing synagogue. It was built in 1826 by a famous architect, Joseph Kornhäusl, our most famous Biedermeier architect of Vienna. And it's very beautiful inside. You have to walk through that house, and then when you get into the courtyard, suddenly you're standing in the synagogue. So the entrance is through the house, and in the courtyards they were allowed to build the synagogue. This was kept like this in 1926 because the synagogue was built according to the rules of Joseph II. Now you know our Joseph II. Yeah? Joseph II was, for the 18th century, a reformer par excellence. He was very modern. He was also fascinated by the ideas of enlightenment, and he was, in a certain way, also convinced that all people should have a good life. He was not so convinced that everyone was absolutely equal. Yeah? He was still the emperor, but he really tried to make the lives of his people a little bit easier. So he gave the Jewish people the so-called Tolerance Treaty. And in this Tolerance Treaty, he wrote down that Jewish people and also Protestant people were allowed to build synagogues and Protestant churches. But he was still an emperor of the 18th century, so he was modern, but not yet overly modern. So he said, build your synagogues, build your churches, but please hide them behind a facade. We don't want to see them from the outside. In his time, no synagogue was built. The community was still too small. But later, in 1826, the few very wealthy Jewish families here in Vienna, they gathered, they said, we want to have a synagogue, and they got the permission by Emperor Franz I. And he said, yes, okay, but build it according to the rules of my uncle, Joseph II, hide it behind the facade. And this is exactly how it worked. When you go to the big museum, the big Jewish museum in Dorotheagasse, you will see a model of the synagogue, and there you will understand. When you look at the model, you will understand how it was built. It's a pretty model. So just to give you an idea, yeah, we were talking about Schlomm, who lived actually here in this area. I suppose it looked different in those days, in the 1190s. Then we had the first community that was expelled in the Gezerah in 1420. Then slowly the second community came together. This was the one that lived down here on the left side in the Untere Werd in Leopoldstadt. It was expelled in the year 1670 by Leopold I for pretty much the same reasons as the first community was expelled. It was not such a cruel expulsion, but still, they all had to go. And Leopold I named the ghetto, the former Jewish place, after himself, Leopoldstadt. So that what the ghetto used to be formerly, this is now Leopoldstadt. And in the area, like at the place where the synagogue was in the ghetto, is now the Leopoldstädter Pfarrkirche, the Leopoldstädter parish church. There are the rumors that the synagogue here was not destroyed like all the other big synagogues in Vienna, because around the year 1938 we had more than 20 big synagogues in Vienna, and they were all destroyed within one single or two nights, the Kristallnacht, the pogrom night in November 1938. This one here survived, and this one survived for a very, very specific reason. Some people say, yes, it was a hidden synagogue. The Nazis had no idea that there was a synagogue, and this is why it was safe. This is not true. The Nazis knew, of course, that there was a synagogue and an important one. But have a look at the street here. I'm turning around slowly. Fox on the run. Have a look at the street, how narrow it is. Had they set fire to the synagogue, which is hidden here on the left side, they probably would have set fire to all the other houses around here. And this is something they did not want to do. So they decided not to burn the synagogue, but go inside and destroy the inside of the synagogue and use it as a storage room. There was another reason why they did not want to destroy the synagogue or burn the synagogue. Upstairs is the center of the Jewish community. That means there are offices, there are the archives, there are the lists where the Jewish people used to live, how many kids did they have, what were their belongings, did they own houses, and so on. And so the Nazis were not interested in burning those lists. They wanted to go inside and see where the Jewish people were living. So these are the reasons why this synagogue survived. There are tours in the synagogue. I can also show you. Look here. So daily tours starting at 10 a.m. Big recommendation again. And here on the photo you see a little bit of the beautiful inside of the synagogue. It has a dome, blue with the stars, the golden stars. Oopsie. The golden stars, because God said your people will be as manifold as stars in the sky. And all around are the 12 pillars. Are the 12 pillars for the 12 Jewish tribes. In 1945, the synagogue was very quickly reopened because it was the only place where survivors of camps could go. Where else should they go? In their apartments at other people? Nazis. The Nazis were not suddenly gone because the war was over and Hitler was gone. That didn't mean that all the Nazis were suddenly gone. So the people, where should they go? So they went to the synagogue, hoping that they would find family members or so. So it was quickly reactivated and services were held, but it was also a place where you could get food and support and clothes and whatever. So this is here in Rabensteig, the bookshop Singer. It's about all the literature that you need to learn about the Jewish history and present of Vienna. And it's also the Jewish info point here. And they also offer tours here. So if I am not available, plan B, you can book a tour here. And the neighbor here is the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies. Big recommendation again, because in here is this little Simon Wiesenthal Museum. It's free of charge, you don't have to pay, and it gives a wonderful insight into the fascinating life of a survivor of, I think, 5 or 6 concentration camps. So you see, there is a lot to explore and a lot to see in the city of Vienna. And now we are going to our last station. As always, I have no idea what time it is. Are there members of the Jewish choir joining the tour today? Because I was told that some of you would be joining the tour. That would be great. You could sing something for us. And that takes us to the fact that takes us back into the year 1826. So one more view of the synagogue over there. It takes us back into the year 1826 when the synagogue was opened. A synagogue needs a cantor, and a synagogue in Vienna needs a great cantor because Vienna is the music city. So we all love music, we know a lot about music and good voices. So in 1826 they called a very talented, very young cantor from Hohenems in Vorarlberg over to Vienna. And his name, look, here we are in modern times, stepping out of the cozy little streets on Judenplatz, and where you see the modern houses over there. In that direction used to be the home of the second Jewish community until the year 1670. So that was the area of the ghetto. There was only one bridge leading across the river, and when you go over there, you can find traces of Jewish life there. And that was also the area where the big synagogues around the year 1900 used to be, in Tempelgasse, in Tempelgasse. Oh my Lord, I'm so excited. And also the Große Schiffsschule and the Polish Temple, the Turkish Temple, these were all over there. These were all huge synagogues, and all of them were destroyed within a few hours. There are synagogues again over there. They are hidden for security reasons, most of them. But what you also find over there are kosher restaurants, like Bahurtov or others. Some of them milky, some of them for the dark gray sky, for fitting for this sad topic. But there are the kosher restaurants over there, kosher supermarkets, kosher butcheries, a wonderful pastry shop, Ohel Moshe. I love the pastries there. And there is the market, Carmelita market, where you also get food and so on. So it's a very lively Jewish area, especially when you go there on a Friday, for example. Then you will also see many members of the Jewish community. It's good to see that they are back, that they are alive, and hopefully not afraid anymore. And I hope that it stays like this. This is always... Yeah. Nicholas is looking at me very strict because the time is over, but I would like to finish in front of a very specific memorial. And while we are going there, I want to tell you one more very interesting thing. On Shabbat days, for Orthodox Jews, it's not allowed to leave their homes. You should stay at home and make this the day of God. But to make the life of Orthodox Jewish people a little bit easier, there is the possibility to make your home larger. It's an artificial enlargement of your home. It's called an eruf. An eruf can be a wall, it can be a river, it can be a wire somewhere. And then the roof makes your home larger so that you can move outside and that you can also carry something outside. This is also not really allowed. Vienna is one of the very few cities in Europe that has an eruf. And the eruf, this artificial boundary, goes around all the inner districts. All the inner districts are covered by the eruf. You can, if you don't understand exactly what I mean, it's very hard to explain the system or the idea behind an eruf, then Google it, and there is a own website, Vienna eruf, and when you open it, you will see like a red light system, and when the light is green, you know that the eruf is working, because there should be no break into the eruf. But really Google it, have a look, or come with me on one of my Jewish tours, then I'll explain the eruf properly. And finally, we are finishing here in front of the memorial for the victims of the Gestapo. It's a little bit misleading because it says here was the house of the Gestapo. The house of the Gestapo was actually over there, where you see the brick building. There was a big hotel formerly over there, the Hotel Metropole, which was destroyed partly in 1945. And here in the old house, that was here before this one was built, was the headquarters of the Gestapo. And here was a prison where people were tortured and from there also sent to concentration camps. So it was a center of hell, more or less. This is why you have the star here, the yellow star, and also the red triangle for the political prisoners. And it's made from granite, like the granite the stone from Mauthausen concentration camp. And in the middle, this is a prisoner, and he is wearing the uniform of the concentration camp's prisoners with the stripes. It's only symbolic here. You don't really see it so well, but this is what it should resemble. Okay, my dear friends. Oops. Here I am. It's incredible. We did the tour. I was very excited because, as I said before, it's a hard topic and it's nothing funny. So, but it's important to talk about it. And this is one of my favorite tours, I have to say. I have been doing that for a long time already. So I hope that you enjoyed it as much as this is a topic that you can enjoy. I was happy that many of you came with me, because when I started the tour there were only 50 people and then suddenly 100 people. That's good. I'm very happy about that. Next tour will be Bratislava. Is the next Bratislava? I think the next live stream will be Bratislava, together with my wonderful colleague Susanna. And then also the Ring Avenue tour, Ring Avenue Part 4. Okay, so let's join me, please, or I will be happy if you join me on another tour. This will be in German again. I hope you liked the English tour. And I say goodbye to you. If you want to buy me a beer, or us a beer, or I don't know, a glass of wine, we will be very happy about it. And yeah, stay tuned. And I look forward to seeing you again. Goodbye, my friends. It was a pleasure to see you. Bye. Take care.